A single dry seed hits a metal bowl with a sharp, hollow sound. Beside it sits a spoon of green powder, fine enough to leave dust on the fingertips. A few inches away, a broad, raw leaf waits beside a hot pan. A nutrition chart can force all three into the same question: how much protein per 100 grams? But the scale does not know the plant. It cannot tell whether a seed still carries bitterness on its skin, whether a powder looks strong only because the water has been driven out, or whether a leaf is the wrong food until heat changes the risk. That is where the old plant story begins. Before any plant becomes food, older kitchens did not ask only for a number. They asked what part of the plant this was, how it was prepared, whether it was safe raw, and who should be cautious. If you take medication, use blood thinners, manage blood sugar, have kidney concerns, or live with a diagnosed condition, these questions matter enough to discuss with a qualified professional. A plant can be food. It can support a diet. It is not medical care. These are 7 overlooked food plants people compare to meat. But the real value is not hidden in the number alone. It is hidden in the handling. Now look at the seed that makes the trick visible in your hand. Quinoa.
Quinoa looks almost too small for its reputation. Rub a dry seed head between your fingers and the grains fall loose like pale grit, more like something swept from the bottom of a jar than a modern protein food. But people kept this crop for a reason. In Andean food traditions, quinoa mattered because it could grow where food was not always easy: thin air, hard weather, difficult soil. The seed was not glamorous, it was dependable. Then comes the detail a protein chart does not show. The seed has a surface, and that surface matters. Quinoa is commonly rinsed before cooking because of bitter saponins on the outside. That bitterness is not just a taste problem, it is the plant pushing back, reminding you that harvest is not the same as food. A hand pours the seeds into a strainer, water runs through, and the bitterness begins to leave. Only after that does the dry grain go into the pot, swell with water, and become a cooked bowl. And when that happens, the number changes. Dry quinoa and cooked quinoa do not weigh the same in a real meal. Quinoa does not need to beat meat to matter. It needs to be understood as a seed that moves through stages: dry head, loose grain, rinsed seed, cooked food. The protein story begins with the sound of water through a strainer.
Moringa often arrives online with too much noise around it. Miracle tree, superfood powder, green cure-all. Those words make the real plant harder to see. Before the powder, there are leaves, small leaflets hanging from thin stems, light enough to flutter when a hand brushes past them. Fresh, they wilt down like other greens in a pot. Dried, crushed, and ground, they become something else entirely: a green powder that clings to the spoon and stains the edge of a jar. That is where the comparison becomes slippery. A fresh moringa leaf contains water, while the dried powder has had much of that water removed. The powder can look more concentrated because it is more concentrated. That does not make the plant magical. It means the form has changed. Moringa may be valuable in food traditions where the tree grows well, and dried leaf powder may have practical uses in small food-level amounts. But leaf, seed, pod, root, and powder are not one interchangeable substance. A careful person asks which part, while a careless chart reduces the whole plant to one clean number. So the image to remember is not a glowing superfood label. It is green dust on the rim of a spoon, and a fresh leaf that once held far more water than the number admits.
Hemp seed does not look like controversy. It looks like food. The hulled seeds are pale and nutty, soft enough to scatter over oats or fold into bread dough. They sit quietly in the bowl, almost ordinary, which is exactly why the plant's modern reputation can get in the way. Hemp was never only one thing. For a long time, the plant belonged to practical work, fiber, cordage, cloth, seed, oil, and food. Different parts gave people different materials, and those differences still matter. The stalk was not the seed was not the oil, and the food was not the same as a concentrated product. That is the useful boundary. The seed can stand on its own as food, with protein and fats in a dense little package, and it does not need a dramatic medical claim to justify its place. It also does not need to be dragged into every argument attached to the word hemp. Hemp seed is not cannabis medicine, not a concentrated extract, and not every bottle, capsule, or wellness promise that borrows the plant's name. But instead of spending the whole story on what it is not, look at what it is: a small, fatty seed from a plant people valued because it was useful in more than one way. The old value was practical, not glamorous: material from the stalk, food from the seed, and clear boundaries between forms. With hemp, the question is simple: what are you holding?
Forget the neat plastic box at the grocery store, where one product gets one label and one price. Winged bean does not think that way. In warm, humid places where it grows well, it climbs like it is trying to take the trellis back from the gardener. The vine twists upward, leaves spread, flowers appear, and then the pods hang down with ridges along their sides, green and angular, almost like soft-edged blades. A hand reaches for one pod, but the pod is not the whole plant. The young pod can be food. The leaves can be food. The flowers can be food. The mature seeds are another matter. In some traditions, even the underground part has been used, but not in the same way and not with the same preparation. This is where a protein claim becomes too small. If someone says winged bean is high in protein, the next question should come immediately: which part of the winged bean? A living vine does not become one ingredient because a chart needs one line. Each part has its own texture, harvest time, cooking method, and limit. There's also the climate problem. A vine that thrives in tropical humidity may not fit a cold backyard garden with a short season. Still, the plant is worth remembering because it breaks the supermarket habit. It does not offer a single product. It offers a vine with more than one kitchen inside it. But the story cannot stay in tropical humidity forever. Some protein plants survive by climbing fast through warm air. Others survive by standing through long seasons, leaf after leaf, year after year. That shift takes us from the aggressive vine to a quieter plant, a living cutting that keeps the meal going.
Tree collards are not loud plants. They do not rattle in a dry pod, arrive as powder, or carry the immediate danger of a raw chaya leaf. Their force is slower, and that is why they matter. A tree collard can stand upright with broad leaves and sometimes purple-tinged stems, looking less like a temporary vegetable and more like a green post that learned to feed people. In suitable, mild climates, gardeners often keep it going from cuttings, and that changes the emotion of the crop. A seed begins again, but a cutting continues. Push a cutting into damp soil, and the story is no longer about one harvest. It is about whether the plant will root, leaf out, and become part of the household rhythm. Outer leaves can be taken while the plant keeps growing, when climate and care allow it. That is not the same as saying it feeds everyone forever. It means the plant asks to be understood over time. The value is not only protein, it is return. A bunch of greens from the store ends at the refrigerator drawer. A living collard cutting in the right place can become a repeating food habit. But leafy greens still have boundaries. For most people, they're ordinary food. For people on blood thinners or anyone managing a condition where vitamin K intake matters, major changes in routine leafy green consumption should not be treated casually. Useful does not mean casual, and tree collards prove that point quietly, with a stem, a cutting, and a handful of leaves taken without killing the plant. From here, the story dries out. The next crop does not ask for damp soil or a mild garden. It asks a harder question. What kind of protein can survive when water is scarce?
Inside a dry Tepary pod, the small hardened seeds rattle against each other, a sharp, thin sound that tells a story of restraint rather than abundance. This is not the sound of a lush garden. It is the sound of food that learned to wait. Tepary beans are associated with dryland food traditions, especially in desert agriculture. That matters because protein is not only a nutrient question. In harsh places, it becomes a water question. Can the crop grow with less? Can the pod dry down before the land turns harder? Can the seed be saved in a jar, carried into another season and cooked when fresh food is gone? A glossy protein product cannot answer those questions. A small, dry bean can. Tepary beans are sometimes discussed in relation to steadier blood sugar patterns because beans contain fiber, starch, and protein inside a whole food matrix. But that sentence needs a firm boundary. This is food language, not treatment language. Tepary beans do not treat diabetes. They do not replace medication. They do not replace medical supervision. If someone manages diabetes or takes blood sugar medication, no bean should become a health protocol from a video. The safer story is still strong. A Tepary bean in a dry pod carries protein, yes, but it also carries adaptation. It carries the memory of people who selected crops under pressure, not for a label, but for survival in real ground. Food does not always arrive soft, green, and easy. Sometimes it arrives hard, dry, and patient. And after the dry pod, the story returns to green leaves, but with a warning strong enough to end the episode. Some leaves only become the right food after they meet heat.
Chaya looks generous, and that is part of the danger. In warm climates, it can grow as a leafy shrub with broad green leaves that seem to invite the hand. The plant looks like food before the method has been remembered. Some people call it tree spinach, and that nickname is useful until it becomes misleading. Spinach makes people think of raw handfuls, salad bowls, quick smoothies, casual use. Chaya should not be treated that way. The old food use includes cooking, and that detail has to come before the praise. The raw leaf is not the version to imitate. The safer image is a pan, heat rising, leaves going in, edges softening, green darkening as the leaf collapses into the cooked form older kitchens trusted. That change is the whole lesson. Chaya can be productive. It can be valued as a leafy food in places where it grows well. It can belong to real food traditions, but it is not casual. The method is not decoration. The method is the door. This is where the word natural becomes useless by itself. Natural does not tell you which part to eat, whether to cook it, who should avoid it, how often it belongs on the plate, or what old step modern shortcuts forgot. Chaya is not the final plant because it is the most dramatic. It is final because it refuses to separate value from preparation. A raw leaf beside a salad bowl tells the wrong story, while a leaf softening in a hot pan tells the right one. Look back at the counter now. A strainer with rinsed quinoa, green moringa powder on the edge of a spoon, pale hemp seeds in a bowl, ridged winged bean pods from a climbing vine, a tree collard cutting waiting for damp soil, dry Tepary beans in a jar, chaya leaves collapsing in a hot pan. None of these plants is explained by protein alone. Quinoa asks to be rinsed. Moringa asks whether the leaf is fresh or dried. Hemp asks whether you are holding seed, fiber, oil, extract, or something else entirely. Winged bean asks which part of the vine you mean. Tree collards ask whether food can come from continuity instead of starting over. Tepary beans ask whether a crop can survive scarcity. Chaya asks whether heat is part of safety. That is the better question behind protein plants. Not which one beats meat, but what did people have to know before this plant became food? The number matters, but the number comes late. First comes the hand, the seed coat, the strainer, the drying leaf, the cutting, the dry pod, and the hot pan. That is the knowledge modern labels cannot carry by themselves. The plant name was never enough. The method was the part people forgot. If you want more plant stories that keep the mystery without losing the safety, subscribe to Plants They Forgot. And tell me which of these 7 plants you have actually seen, grown, or eaten, and whether you knew the method mattered before today.